Doug Harris gets us acquainted with a car that he's owned for many years and is now ready to make the car go as fast as it looks. Sam and Doug provide a sneak peek of what's in store for this project.
Doug, I absolutely enjoyed doing the Hudson project with you the last 2 seasons, but this one seems like it's more up my alley. I'm loving what you brought this season. Tell me about your car.
Well, this car is a car that I've owned for about 30 years. It was interesting when I purchased, and what it really is, it's a 280Z chassis called an Alpha 1 250 GTO. It's a really unique automobile. Like I said, I've owned it for 30 years. The thing about this car is it's got all the looks, but it never had all the go.
We're going to fix that this time, right?
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to building this car, this project, going all the way on through it. I had so much fun doing the Hudson Hornet. It was an absolute blast, and when it came out, it was great. You know, my only thing that I'm sorry we didn't get the opportunity to run the great race because of COVID, but this project, we're going to have a blast. Make it go fast, put the suspension underneath it. So let's go take a look at the stuff that we're going to do here. This motor right here has a lot of sentimental value to me. This was my brother's motor, and it was in a car that he absolutely loved, and it was built, it was a blown motor. We did a lot of stuff to it. And since I lost him, I always thought this would be great if I take this motor and put it in that car. Whenever I drive it, it'll remind me of him.
That is cool. You know what? We took this motor, normally a 302 cubic inch stock 302, is going to have some parts that you had laying around as well as the short block. You had a couple of Edelbrock Performer RPM heads that are going to give us plenty of flow.
Right.
It's going to feed that F303 camshaft, and that's the second to biggest camshaft that we could put on the streets. Back in the day, if we went with an X cam, we'd have to pull the heads off and do valve reliefs in the pistons. But the F cam, you'd get the power, you'd have the sound without having the bear of taking the heads off.
So what kind of RPM range are we looking for?
That thing should do 7,000, a little bit more, 7,500. It's got a 512 lift, huge duration. It's going to give us that idle sound that we're after,
right,
and it's going to perform. It's going to make me put down 500 horsepower at the crank.
With all the forged internals that we have, so we have a forged crank, we have forged rods, we're not going to have any problems spinning it over 7,000.
Not at all. And if you ever wanted to add a power router one day in the future, you're more than welcome to, because all the stuff in the bottom end and really the top end, along with those valve springs, are going to handle anything you give it. Now, anytime you guys are building a car like this and you're building horsepower, you got to be able to handle and you got to be able to stop, or you're not going to have any fun. You're just going to pretty much build a straight line car. So as you can see, we went ahead and we got some parts to upgrade the brakes front and rear. We've got cross-drilled and slotted rotors, bigger diameter, a little bit thicker, 4-piston calipers front and rear, upgrade from a 2-piston. And if you look in the rear, we have a remote caliper for the emergency brake, along with new cables and new brake hoses, which is very important.
You know, Sam, the great thing is, I drove road race cars for about 15 years, had an absolute blast. I do a little vintage car racing right now. Is to build this car, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to take the chassis, strengthen the chassis up, put different A-arms on it, build it so it's going to be able to handle. So not only is this going to have the looks, it'll have the power, it'll have the ability to brake, and it's going to be able to handle.
And the engine's already out of the car, so all we have to do to finish stripping this vehicle is going to be to remove the factory Nissan transmission, the drive shaft, and the exhaust. We're going to reuse the tips for the new setup so that we get that traditional look.
Right.
And really, we should be ready to go. We're going to build this in sequence the way you would do it. We're going to tear it apart, get it painted, put it back together, and tackle the interior.
You know, the nice thing about this car is when we do everything, this gives people an opportunity to see what a full build is like. If you make a car that has a lot of horsepower but it can't stop, you're in trouble. If you make a car that has a lot of horsepower and it can't handle, you can get into trouble. This will be the whole package.
And it's all about protecting your investment and using your head. Let's get started.
All righty.
Stay tuned for more Sam's Garage.